Be me, 24, working a regular office job, live at home to save money, trying to build a down payment for a small condo someday. It's not a bad setup. Mom and Dad are good people. The only real source of friction in the house is my sister, Jean. She's 20, in her third year of a liberal arts degree at a university downtown. I love her. She's my sister. But sweet Lord, has the internet melted her brain. Her entire worldview is curated by a TikTok algorithm designed to sell her things and make her feel inadequate. Every conversation, every single observation about the world is filtered through this lens. It's all about aesthetics, vibes, main character energy, and most of all, standards. Specifically, the bare minimum she expects from a future partner. This bare minimum seems to include a six-figure salary, a European car, spontaneous trips to Italy, and the emotional intelligence of a crisis negotiator. She spends hours scrolling through videos of influencers whose boyfriends surprise them with Cartier bracelets for their half-birthday. This would all be harmless, if a bit delusional, except for how it's started to affect our family life. The main target of her newfound enlightenment is our dad, Mark. Dad is a good man. He's a little over 50. Works as a logistics manager for a shipping company. It's not a glamorous job. He doesn't come home with exciting stories about closing big deals. He comes home tired. He's a quiet guy. His idea of a good time is watching a baseball game with a beer or spending a Saturday morning fixing the leaky faucet he's been meaning to get to. He wears New Balance sneakers, not because they're ironically fashionable now, but because he's been wearing them since the 90s, and they're comfortable. His car is a reliable 10-year-old sedan with a small dent in the fender that's been there for 3 years. He doesn't take Mom to fancy Michelin star restaurants. They go to the same local Italian place they've been going to for 25 years, where the owner knows their order by heart. In Jean's eyes, this doesn't make him a solid, reliable family man. It makes him a failure, a low-value man who settled. The comments started small a few months back. We'd be driving somewhere and she'd point out a new BMW. "God, I can't wait until I'm with a guy who can afford a real car," she'd say, loud enough for Dad to hear from the driver's seat. He wouldn't say a thing, just keep his eyes on the road. Mom's birthday was sometime in the spring. Dad got her a beautiful new gardening set she'd been wanting and a gift certificate for her favorite nursery. She was thrilled. Later that night, I overheard Jean on the phone with a friend. "It's just sad," she was saying. "He got her a shovel. My friend's mom got a weekend trip to a spa resort. Mom just deserves better, you know?" It was this constant dripping faucet of disrespect. She saw his practicality as a lack of romance. She saw his financial caution as a lack of ambition. She saw his quiet nature as a lack of passion. He was, in her TikTok-fueled vocabulary, a beta, and she, Jean, was destined for an alpha. I tried to talk to her about it once or twice, told her Dad works his tail off for us, that he's a great father. She'd just roll her eyes. "You don't get it," she'd say. "You're a guy. You don't understand the pressure on women to partner up. I can't afford to settle for someone who isn't providing and protecting at the highest level." I asked her what Dad did every single day if not providing and protecting. She claimed it was different. "That's just paying bills. That's the baseline. I'm talking about a lifestyle. I'm talking about elevating your partner." It was like arguing with a chatbot that only had 5 pre-programmed lines, all of them insane. The whole thing came to a head a few weeks ago. It was a Friday evening. We were all at the dinner table. Mom had made lasagna. Dad was home from a long week, looking particularly drained. He was eating quietly, just listening to the rest of us talk. Jean, of course, was glued to her phone, shoveling food into her mouth while her eyes were locked on the screen. Suddenly, she lets out a dramatic sigh and shoves the phone in Mom's face. On the screen is some influencer girl, posing on a yacht in a place that looked like Monaco or something. Her equally chiseled boyfriend was standing behind her, a smug look on his face. The caption was something like, "He told me to pack a bag for the weekend, and this is where we ended up. Find a man who makes you his priority." Jean looked up from the phone, her eyes shining with a mixture of envy and determination. "This," she announced to the table, "this right here is what I mean. This is the bare minimum. This is what a man who truly values his woman does. He invests in experiences. He creates memories. He leads." I just stared at her. Mom gave a weak, uncomfortable smile and handed the phone back. Dad didn't even look up. He just took another bite of lasagna. His silence seemed to infuriate Jean more than any argument would have. She put her phone down and looked directly at him. "No offense, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with a kind of patronizing pity. "But I'm making a promise to myself. I will never, ever end up with a man like you." The air went out of the room. Mom froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. I felt a hot surge of anger in my chest. I need someone with drive, someone who wants more than just this. She vaguely waved her hand around our perfectly nice, comfortable dining room. "I want an alpha. Someone who is going to build an empire, not just maintain a budget." She finished with the ultimate insult, delivered with the smug certainty of a 20-year-old who has it all figured out. I just think Mom could have done so much better. That was it. That was the line. Dad finally stopped eating. He slowly put his fork down. He looked at Jean, and for the first time, I saw something other than exhaustion in his eyes. It was a deep, profound hurt. But he didn't say a word. He just picked up his plate, took it to the sink, and walked out to the back porch. Mom started to say something, then just shook her head and started clearing the other plates, her face tight with disappointment. Jean, in her own little world, seemed to think she had just dropped some brave, empowering truth bomb. She picked her phone back up, completely oblivious to the crater she had just left in the middle of our family dinner. I sat there, watching her, and the anger I felt wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. It was a cold, clear, calculating anger. Arguing with her was pointless. Her brain was fortified with layers of memes and pop psychology. Feelings didn't work. Logic didn't work. But numbers might. I didn't say another word to her that night. I just went up to my room, opened my laptop, and started my project. I logged into the family's shared online portal for our bank accounts. Dad had given me access a few years ago in case of emergencies. I wasn't snooping. I was arming myself. I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet. For the next 3 hours, I became a forensic accountant. I pulled up Dad's pay stubs. I found the exact after-tax amount that was deposited into his account twice a month. That was my baseline. Then I started digging through the expenses, the automatic withdrawals, the credit card statements, the bill payments. I created categories. The first one was the roof. I put in the monthly mortgage payment for our 3-bedroom house in a decent suburb. It was a huge number. Then came the property taxes, paid twice a year, which I broke down into a monthly figure. Home insurance. The next category was the lights. Electricity bill, which was always high in the summer. The gas bill, the water bill, the internet and cable package, which Jean would have a meltdown without. The 4 cell phone lines on our family plan. Then came the ride, the monthly payment for Mom's car, the insurance for both cars, with 2 young adult drivers on the policy, which was a killer. Gas. I estimated how much Dad spent just commuting back and forth to work every single day. Regular maintenance, oil changes, new tires. These were just the basics, the unshakable, non-negotiable costs of existing in a modern Western society. The numbers were already staggering, But I was just getting started. I created a new tab, the lifestyle. This is where it got interesting. I started with the groceries. I went through the credit card statements and added up every trip to the supermarket. It was a shocking amount. We weren't eating ramen and beans. We were eating well. I added in subscriptions, Netflix, Amazon Prime, all the things we took for granted. I factored in clothes, household supplies, vet bills for the dog, the occasional dinner out at that Italian place. By the time I was done with the general family expenses, what was left of Dad's income was already a fraction of what it had been. But I saved the most important category for last. I labeled it simply JEAN. I went through the records with a fine-toothed comb. First, the big one, her university tuition. It was paid in a lump sum at the start of each semester, but I divided it by month to show the true cost. It was a monstrous, soul-crushing number, larger than the mortgage payment. Then the payments for her student housing near campus. Next, the monthly payments for her brand-new iPhone, which she just had to have the day it came out. It was on a 2-year payment plan, a quiet little drain every single month. I found the regular e-transfers from Dad's account to hers, labeled allowance or books or spending money. It was a steady, consistent stream of cash, hundreds of dollars a month. I went through the credit card statements again and picked out her specific expenses from when she used the supplementary card Dad gave her for emergencies. The endless stream of Uber Eats orders, the clothes from online boutiques, the concert tickets. I put every single item into its own line in the spreadsheet. Each one was a testament to a life lived without any thought to its cost. When I was finally done, it was almost 2 a.m. I created a final formula at the bottom of the page. Total monthly income, the roof, the lights, the ride, the lifestyle, Jean. I pressed enter. A number appeared. The number was so small, I thought I had made a mistake. I went back and checked all my calculations. Everything was correct. This tiny, pitiful number was what Dad had left for himself at the end of every month. His personal, disposable income. Money for his hobbies, for a new pair of shoes, for a beer with his friends, for anything that was just for him. I looked at the number. Then I looked at the massive figure under the Jean category. I realized that my sister's monthly spending money, her Ubers, and her takeout coffee cost more than what our father had left to live on. His entire life was an act of sacrifice, meticulously hidden behind a wall of quiet competence. He wasn't maintaining a budget. He was performing a sustained, high-wire financial miracle every single month, just so his daughter could live a comfortable life while judging him for not being rich enough. I saved the file on my desktop. I named it The Bare Minimum. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt ready. The next day was Saturday. I let the morning play out as usual. Jean slept in until noon, as is the tradition of the terminally online. I waited for my moment. It came around 3 p.m. Mom and Dad had gone out to run some errands. The house was quiet. I found Jean in her natural habitat, sprawled on the living room couch, one hand scrolling endlessly on her phone, the other dipping into a family-sized bag of chips. I walked in with my laptop and set it down on the coffee table in front of her. She looked up, annoyed at the intrusion. What? I didn't say anything at first. I just opened the laptop and turned it so the screen was facing her. The Excel spreadsheet, the bare minimum, was displayed in all its glory. You talked a lot last night, I said, my voice calm and even. You talked about standards and alphas and what a man is supposed to provide. I thought you might be interested in seeing what's actually being provided. She scoffed, not even looking at the screen properly. I don't need a lecture from you. I know Dad pays the bills. That's not the point. Humor me, I said. Let's take a look together. I pulled up a chair and began my presentation. I started with the top line, Dad's monthly take-home pay. This is the total income, I explained. This is the whole pie. Everything we're about to look at comes out of this number. She glanced at it, unimpressed. To her, it was probably just an abstract figure. Then I moved to the first big block of expenses. The house, the utilities, the cars. I went through it line by line. Mortgage, taxes, insurance. This, I said, circling the total with my finger on the trackpad, is the cost of keeping a roof over your head and the lights on. It's a little over half the entire income, gone before anyone even thinks about buying food. Her eyes flickered over the numbers. A tiny frown appeared on her face. She was still mostly disengaged, but a sliver of her attention had been snagged. Next, I moved to the family lifestyle expenses. Groceries, internet, phones. This is what it costs for us to live comfortably. To have a full fridge, to watch Netflix, for you to be able to doom scroll 24/7. I could see the gears starting to turn in her head. The numbers were bigger than she thought. The cost of things she never, ever considered was adding up in front of her, but it was the final category that broke her. I clicked on the JEAN tab. Her own personal list of expenses filled the screen. I didn't have to be dramatic. The numbers spoke for themselves. And this, I said softly, is you. I pointed to the tuition line item. This is your education. This is the single biggest expense in the entire family budget. It costs more than the mortgage on the house you grew up in. Her jaw went slack. She finally put her phone down. No, she whispered. The student loan covers most of that. No, Jean, I corrected her. The student loan covers a fraction of it. Dad pays the rest directly from his savings and his income, so you don't graduate with a mountain of debt. He's been putting money aside for this since you were 5. She stared at the figure. I could see her reevaluating every complaint she'd ever had about not going on enough vacations. I moved down the list. This is your iPhone, the one you said you needed for school. It costs more per month than Dad's entire phone bill. This is the allowance he sends you every month, no questions asked. This is your car insurance. This is the total of your Uber Eats orders from last month alone, charged to his credit card. I went on, item by item. Each number was a nail in the coffin of her entitled worldview. Her face had gone pale. The smug confidence from last night was gone, replaced by a creeping, dawning horror. She was seeing for the first time the invisible architecture of her own life, the immense hidden scaffolding that held up her comfortable existence, which she had mistaken for the ground floor. When I was done with her section, I scrolled back to the main page and pointed to the final number at the very bottom, the tiny sum that was left over. After all of that, I said, letting the words hang in the air. After the house, the bills, the food, and after paying for every single one of your wants and needs, this is what's left for Dad. This is his empire. This is his personal spending money for the month. I let her look at it. I saw her eyes move from the small number at the bottom to the very large number that was her own total expenses. The comparison was brutal and unavoidable. Her lifestyle was being subsidized by his sacrifice. Her bare minimum was being funded by a man who was living far, far below it himself. She just sat there, silent, staring at the screen. Her breathing was shallow. Right at that moment, as if on cue, the front door opened. Mom and Dad were home. Dad walked into the living room first, carrying a couple of grocery bags. He was wearing his usual weekend outfit, an old faded t-shirt from some charity 5K run he did years ago, and a pair of cargo shorts. He smiled, looking tired but content. "Hey kids," he said, "we got that ice cream you like." Jean looked up from the laptop. She looked at our father, really looked at him. She wasn't seeing the low-value man in the old t-shirt anymore. She was seeing the man who funneled his entire life force into a spreadsheet so that her column could be bigger than his. She was seeing the quiet, unassuming engine that powered her entire world. Her face crumpled. A single tear rolled down her cheek, then another. Without a word, she shot up from the couch and ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. Dad stood there, confused, still holding the grocery bags. What's wrong with her? I just shook my head and closed the laptop. I think she's just realizing a few things. The atmosphere in the house shifted after that. Jean was quiet for the rest of the weekend. She stayed in her room mostly. On Sunday evening, she came out and found me in the kitchen. Her eyes were red and puffy. I didn't know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I honestly had no idea. I feel so stupid. We're all stupid when we're 20, I told her. The important part is what you do after you realize it. The change wasn't instantaneous, but it was real. The next week, she got a job. She started waitressing at a restaurant near campus, picking up evening and weekend shifts. She told Dad to cancel the allowance he was sending her. She started paying her own phone bill. She stopped ordering takeout and started packing lunches. The endless, judgmental commentary about Dad's choices ceased completely. She started talking to him more, asking about his day, listening, actually listening to his answers. The real turning point for me was a few weeks ago. I came home from work late one evening. The house was dark, except for the glow of the TV in the living room. Dad had fallen asleep in his favorite armchair. The baseball game he was watching was long over, now just showing talking heads. He was snoring softly. He looked exhausted, even in his sleep. As I watched, Jean came quietly down the stairs. She saw Dad sleeping there. She went over to the couch, picked up the soft fleece blanket that's always there, and gently, carefully draped it over him. She tucked it in around his shoulders. He stirred a little, but didn't wake up. She stood there for a moment, just looking at him. Then she looked over at me, standing in the doorway. She gave me a small, sad, knowing smile. No words were needed. She finally understood. Her whole life, she'd been dreaming of some mythical alpha she saw on social media, a flashy, loud, empire-building caricature. She never realized she was being raised by one. Not the kind that posts his wins online, but the kind that wins in silence every single day, so that his family can have a life he never did. The kind whose victories aren't measured in sports cars and Rolexes, but in paid tuition, a full pantry, and a daughter who finally gets it.